See, Mitch is so dialed in, it doesn't shock me that he is just easygoing. that he would just, take what's given to him.
Take it?
Yeah. That's who you are.
It could be. You could be right. I don't know. Maybe my wife would say something different.
Hey, it's a personality thing, and I like Mitch Sherman's personality, so that's all that matters. Another personality I like is Glenn Thomas, and I also like when you're right about things, and that was Mitch Sherman because he broke the news. But you've kind of been all over the reports from the very beginning. What is the quarterback room getting out of a coach like him?
It's getting the experience that he's got, which is 2 stints in the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons, and then this last year as an offensive assistant with the Steelers. But I think more than that, Nebraska's getting, and the Nebraska quarterbacks are getting, a coach who is in harmony and understands how to work with Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield in the system. And, we saw in the official announcement yesterday from Nebraska that his title will be co-offensive coordinator, so that secures, any kind of that erases any doubt about the role that Glenn Thomas is going to have in this offense. And Marcus Satterfield, still offensive coordinator. He's coaching tight ends. He's going to be a big part, of course, of the game plan and the play calling, but we don't know exactly how it's all going to break down with how the plays are actually called. I would assume, and based on, the indications that I was getting through this process, is that that's still on Satterfield's plate. Let's see what Thomas's salary is too. That'll be somewhat of an indicator. And I think part of the reason, if you're Nebraska, that you give him that co-OC title is to be able to justify paying him more than your other assistants, like your O-line coach or your wide receivers coach, linebackers coach, whatever. So that would indicate additional responsibility, if he's up in the $1 million range. They've got $2 million coordinators at this point, with Tony White at 1.6 and Satterfield at 1.3. I would suspect that Thomas is also going to be in that 7-figure range, which is just crazy to think that until last year, Nebraska had never had $1 million coordinator.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Mitch, obviously the big story with Glenn Thomas is him coming in that quarterback spot. How much do you think, if at all, that affected the recruitment and ultimate flip of Dylan Raiola? Is that something you think they maybe leaked to him early, or that they knew about that far back, or do you think the two are not really connected?
Not specifically, but I do, but indirectly, yes, because I think that part of the conversation between the Raiolas and they would have inside knowledge about what's going on with the Nebraska offensive staff even before that call was made back on December 10th, 10 days before signing day, about what the Huskers were thinking about offensively because of the connection to Donovan Raiola. Now, sometimes a head coach will keep his assistants somewhat, in the dark about exactly how changes are going to be made, because you never know who the changes might affect. But I think it was clear from the end of the season, or even before that nothing was changing with Donovan Raiola. He's with the offensive line. He was going to be with the offensive line all through. They're not, he doesn't have any specific impact on who's coaching the quarterback. So if your Rule, you could be a little more upfront with Donnie about how that's going to go. And in turn, if you tell him and he knows, then Dominic is going to know and Dylan is going to know. So I think that Nebraska talked with the Raiolas about the fact that they were going to make changes at how the quarterback position was coached and who was coaching the quarterback position. But a month ago, and we're talking, it's been more than a month now since the whole Dylan flip began to take shape. At that point, I don't think they knew that it was going to be Glenn Thomas. He's a possibility. His name was out there. He's got history with Matt Rule. But no, I don't think that him specifically impacted Dylan's decision to come off of Georgia and come to Nebraska.
Mitch, how much do you expect Satterfield to settle in after getting back in his comfort zone, moving away from coaching quarterbacks and coaching just the offense and tight ends like he was initially brought in here to do? Do you expect him to get more comfortable in his role?
Yeah, I'm optimistic that it can be a good move for him. And, on paper, it looked okay a year ago. If you go back to January of 2023 and Nebraska's just signed Jeff Sims, who's an experienced quarterback at the Power 5 level. And you've got Chuba Purdy, you've got Heinrich Harburg, and at that point you still had Casey Thompson and Logan Smothers when Nebraska made the decision to go with Sat as the QB's coach. So you had depth and you had experience and you had multiple players. You had 3 who had started games at the Power 5 level. So you're thinking, hey, this quarterback thing can work out pretty well. It's one of the more set positions on the offensive side. And as the season played out from the very beginning, that couldn't have been further from the reality of the situation. First, you have Thompson and Smothers go into the transfer portal after spring, and then Jeff Sims plays poorly at the beginning of the season, gets hurt in week 2, and all of a sudden you're down to, and Purdy was hurt at that time too. All of a sudden you're down to Heinrich Harburg. So Marcus Satterfield, if you knew a year ago what they knew in September, I think Nebraska would have made more of an effort to get him help at that quarterback spot, but you couldn't change it. You were changing enough on the fly after week 2 of last season about what you were doing offensively. You couldn't really shift responsibilities on the offensive staff. I mean, he was in that position for the long haul in 2023. So needless to say, he had a lot on his plate. And it was probably too much to deal with that situation at quarterback, everything that was going on. It was a lot. And manage a first-year offense, call plays, strategize, game plan every week. He earned that big salary that, the biggest at the time, that was the biggest for a coordinator in Nebraska history. So, you go into this year and you say, how do you prevent a situation like that from happening? And the first thing, the most important thing is having players who can handle the moments, and they think they have that in Dylan Raiola. And then number 2 is to change up some responsibilities. So the coach, no matter what happens, the coach who is in charge of that quarterback position is at no time going to be saddled with everything that needs to be done to get the offense running right.
Mitch, we've got about 2 minutes left here with you. I know yesterday you put out kind of a breakdown of the roster for Nebraska and the top guys at each position. As you're going through all these names, just looking at the roster kind of in a holistic view, the way you did there, were there any takeaways you got that you maybe weren't expecting in the sense of, oh, maybe this group is a little deeper than I realized, maybe this group needs a little more help than I realized? Anything like that jump out at you while you were putting that together?
Yeah, and I went about it from trying to construct a list of 115 players because I feel like that number is more relevant in roster construction right now than the 85 who were on scholarship. Because Nebraska can do things with NIL, it's not like you have 115 who are getting a scholarship or the equivalent of a scholarship, but it's north of 85 for sure. Mm-hmm. And you can try to figure out who's on scholarship and who's not, and it becomes kind of a difficult exercise. You see Nebraska this year released all of the recruits, including the walk-ons, in one list. That's the first time that they've done that. So that was kind of a signal to me, like, hey, these are blurry lines. So let's not focus on the 85. Let's focus on the 115 who can come to preseason camp. And that's the list that I put out. And this is my guess. This is a projection. There are probably a few on there that if the coaches came up with it right now, they don't need to until August. But if they came up with it right now, you might have a couple that were off. It's like trying to project the 64 team field or 68 team field for the tournament in January. But there's more depth, there's more experience. If you look at it and you go through position by position, you see a number of those position groups like offensive line, like defensive line, like the secondary, that are really senior dominated, and that's something that Nebraska hasn't enjoyed. At least seniors who have a lot of experience. So they're still a young team. There's still 48 freshmen on that list of 115 redshirt and true freshmen, and just 19 seniors. But they're much further along than 14 months ago when Matt Rule took over, as far as having depth and valuable experience at quite a few spots.
That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, great stuff as always. We will catch up with you again soon.
All right, good to talk to you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Mitch.
That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. You can check out all of his work at theathletic.com.